Call the City Council work session to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining.
Excused.
Ramey. Here. Lamore. Felder. Here. Hayter. Here. Stilgrave. Here. Mayor Clark.
Here. We have the work session. City Manager Robinson, I know we have a couple items and a couple that additional you may have, but go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor and Council. First, I'd like to talk about the, we want to review with you a Monroe Public Schools licensing agreement in regards to some city-owned property at Manor Park to help them facilitate the traffic that is, I guess, an everlasting situation there with the dropping off of kids, et cetera. And Mark Cochran will kind of update you on where we're at with this.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council,
Good evening.
Clerk Treasurer. So this evening on your agenda, you've got consideration for an agreement with Monroe Public Schools to help with the traffic circulation issues that exist at Manor. Seems appropriate we're having this conversation on the first day of school for Monroe Public Schools. But if you're familiar, I understand Manor School is one of the most popular schools of choice within Monroe Public Schools in the county, which results in a significant number of parent pickup, drop-off in the morning and pickup in the afternoon. And with Manor being on a dead-end street, as I'm sure Councilman Felder is aware, we've talked about this a few times, creates some traffic congestion problems throughout the neighborhood. And so we've been working with Monroe Public Schools and Superintendent Andrew Shaw. And I understand this is conversation dating back to Dr. Everly's time with Monroe Public Schools as well. But we felt it was an appropriate time to move this project forward. Monroe Public Schools is proposing to install a new path or driveway through Manor Park to access the school. I know this is a little bit small on your screen, but this is Manor Park, and the red lines represent the boundary and property lines for the park. But to familiarize ourselves with the general vicinity, this is Donnelly, and right here is the existing playground. Right here is the parking lot. Here is the picnic shelter, and here are the former courts that are no longer utilized since the improvements were made at Father Carnes Park. What Monroe Public Schools is proposing to do is to have a new parent loop where parents would enter off of Donnelly into the school parking lot. And I don't know if you can see my mouse, but essentially come to the end of the parking lot. A couple trees would be removed, and the trees are nearly dead already and need removed. The path would proceed, this would be north along the eastern property boundary within Manor Park behind the residential properties on Donnelly, and we'll talk more about that in 1 second. The path would continue, or the driveway would continue onto Monroe Public Schools property, connecting into their parking lot via the existing driveway that they have on the east side of the school. Parents would drop off once they get to the school building and then exit out onto Lorraine Street and depart in whichever direction they're going from Lorraine Street. And so this would be a one-way path that would be, this year, it will be stone. However, the agreement that you're considering this evening does say that it has to be paved within 1 year. And Monroe Public Schools is aware of that, committing to do that. At the parking lot access onto that drive, there will be a gate, and the gate will only be open certain periods right before parent drop-off, close after parent drop-off is complete. And then at the end of the day, they would open it shortly before parent pickup and then close again at the end of the day until the next school day. So the path and the driveway in the agreement, it says it can only be used during parent drop-off and parent pickup. All of the costs related to this project are going to be borne by Monroe Public Schools, not the city of Monroe. And in the event, if they ever decide that they no longer want to use the path, then they're responsible for removing it and restoring it to the condition that the site is currently in. The other thing is they've done the engineer drawing, the site drawing, through Kohler Architect. This is the official site plan that's been turned in. And so all the site prep and all the site work, the due diligence, Patrick Lewis and I met with Superintendent Shaw on the site last week to talk about drainage issues, stormwater runoff that will be addressed through the infrastructure installation by Monroe Public Schools. And additionally, the school district is going to replace the fencing that's along the west side of all the residential properties adjacent to the drive. There will be a setback buffer in between the residential property lines and the driveway. The city does have the right to require screening of our selection in the agreement. So if we need to have certain screening placed on the fence or landscaping, we can require that, and the city retains the right to do that. Obviously, we wanted to know how the residents were going to feel about this, and so we asked Superintendent Shaw, and the building principal went out and visited and knocked on the door for all the adjacent property owners. All of them have seemed willing and appreciative of the new solution that's proposed, primarily because they said they're either going to back up in front of our house and we can't get out of our driveway, or this option, which will only be used certain period of the day. And so the resident feedback has been positive for those that they've talked to, and they've talked to a good majority of them, not all of them yet because they haven't been able to reach them. And so the school district is also going to be responsible for all maintenance of the drive, so snow removal, making sure that for the next year anyway, that the stone stays in the designated drive aisle is going to be their responsibility. Any pavement upkeep in the future after it's paved, they're going to be responsible for. And so there really is no cost to the city for this other than the impact on the park. The impact on the park, we've had some conversations, Brad Willie and I, our park supervisor, regarding how this is going to impact operations at the park. So obviously in the morning and at that period in the afternoon, there will be a portion of parking spaces that won't be available to be used, because if you pull in there and park, then you're going to be blocked in by cars that are waiting to drop off or pick up. And so we'll sign during certain periods that that parking will be unavailable, but there's plenty of parking on the other side of the parking lot that can still be utilized. Traffic control signs will be installed. Designated pedestrian access to the playground will be installed at the drive entrance and the sidewalk. And looking at the future master plan for the park as well, that City Council and the Planning Commission has adopted, this doesn't have any negative impacts on future modifications that are proposed with the master plan. So probably some things will adjust in the future as the situation of the parking lot in terms of the size and the shape of it and the location of it. We'll probably adjust that in the future. The parking lot does need to be redone anyway. And so that'll be a CIP project that gets submitted for a future year this year as well. The playground, we have had some conversations. It needs to be updated and probably relocated. That's something our parks crews are prepared to do if we need to, into another area of the park. And the other conversation that we're having is the necessity for the playground equipment, given that the school has a relatively sufficient playground on their property. Is there some cooperation we can have back and forth to just have one? So all those conversations will be ongoing, but this won't impact negatively impact future improvements to the park and the playground. And I think any damage that's caused to the rest of the park or our facilities as a result of this as well, the school district is responsible for repairing or improving. That's in number 7 in the agreement. So.
Any questions for Mr. Cochran?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Cochran, for that. I think as you identified, I sort of took this tour myself probably over a year ago now with then Principal Bunden and Director Lewis, and then tried to convey those messages forward to now Principal Tylinda as well. regarding trying to attempt a couple of things to alleviate their traffic situation, where if you've been around that building at pickup or drop-off time or pretty much anywhere close to it, you can sort of see why that's an issue. I believe that this is going to allow for, this is a one-way path, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Gotcha. So the cars are turning right out onto the Lorraine, and in that right turn in, right turn out, I think will facilitate an easier traffic flow. But have we ran any, back of the napkin numbers on how this will affect overall traffic so that we're not just moving the congestion down a block?
Yep. So the stacking, I believe there was at least 20 or 30 cars that can be stacked up on this driveway at any time. Obviously, those will be moving. The school district, I should also let you know, the school board did approve the agreement as presented at their meeting last week. So the next step is for council to consider it. The communication that the school district is going to be putting out to parents once this is implemented, if approved, is parents should not arrive before the gate is going to be open. Superintendent Shaw indicated he'll be on site along with the principal and others to make sure that the smooth transition occurs, that parents aren't lining up on Donna Lee waiting for the gate to open. And we had some conversation this afternoon with Director of Public Safety Chad Tolstead as well, possibly about future traffic control orders, about parking on Donna Lee during those times would not be permitted to prevent exactly what you're saying. So the gate will be open shortly before school starts to allow sufficient time for cars to circulate through without having to back up onto Donna Lee. They'll probably queue on the driveway until drop-off actually occurs, but.
Okay. Yeah, I know that we've been working on this, and this very closely resembles what Director Lewis and I and Principal Bunden sort of came up with in terms of the most practical options. So it's nice to see the full circle of how that's going to take form, and I think it's a needed addition. And if they're willing to pay for it and just ask for the permission to use the property in this way, I think that that's probably a positive impact on the neighborhood and the city's operations overall as well.
Thank you. And Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
this is why we also propose a license agreement. The city still retains complete ownership of the park, just gives them the ability to install it without any legal rights to the property, like through an easement or conveying the property right over or surveying or anything like that. So a bit of it will be trial, once it gets started, making sure that it's implemented as identified and intended.
Very good.
Schedule-wise, the school district, if council approves tonight at their next meeting, I believe on September 11th, they're going to approve the contract for installation and begin shortly after that. So,
Other questions? Brian?
Yeah, just one probably really minor, silly question would be more or less insurance. Do we need any kind of different type of insurance to allow such things on our property?
yep. And so there is an insurance requirement in the license agreement as well, under number 6, that they have to have liability insurance naming the city as additionally insured.
That's at the public schools cost, what you're saying.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you. That's all I need to know.
Other questions? Very good. Thanks, Mark.
You.
Manager Robinson, your next
Well,
item?
while you're up there, Mark, we we also are giving you a review on a proposed demolition ordinance. Currently, we don't have a demolition ordinance in the city, and as our building official has created an administrative document that includes items outlined by the International Property Maintenance Code, but we don't actually have an ordinance that would be enforceable, outside of that code. So we have been working on this, and I think Mark has some more information.
Mark?
Good evening again. So this evening I did pass out a copy of the draft ordinance for you for you to review. On the regular meeting agenda tonight, we do have an action item just to set the public hearing to consider the draft ordinance. But as the city manager indicated, the purpose of this was really looking statewide across the state, many communities have a demolition ordinance in place as a best practice. It's not just to have an ordinance for the sake of having an ordinance. However, as the city manager indicated, our building official does have a set of standards for demolition requirements and site restoration standards. Those are more policy and property maintenance code. So the practice is if somebody is going to demolish a structure in the city of Monroe, they have to pull a demolition permit. In order for that permit to be issued, the property owner has to agree to follow the standards that are outlined by the building official in his or her policy. The best practice for consistent enforcement is to have an ordinance in place that has a little bit more teeth to it. And so we know some people don't get a demo permit. Last week we had somebody burn a shed down, and that was their means of method of demolishing their shed. But so we encourage the enforcement consistency on demolition across the city to follow the same site standards. Another example of why this is needed, think about in Precinct 3, the Mako property. Had the ordinance that's being presented in front of you this evening been in place, that foundation would not exist. Everything would have been required to be demolished and the site restored rather than a foundation and a smokestack being left. And that's just one example. Another example is the National Park. If you're on the federal property before it was conveyed to the Park Service, demolition of the former paper plant occurred. However, part of the foundation still exists in the middle of the battlefield. At the time, recommended that the foundation should have been removed, and the Park Service is making efforts to have that removed in the future. But rather than allow for partial structures to remain, it's requiring certain standards. So I was just going to highlight a few things in the ordinance. Certainly, I respect you're probably going to want time to review it, and we can always discuss it again when it comes back for a public hearing if you have questions or modifications. But first is violation. If anybody violates the ordinance, then they would be responsible for a municipal civil infraction. This is common for most violations of an ordinance would result in municipal civil infraction. The city's authority to pursue legal action in that manner versus just closing out a permit or building record enforcement. Stating that the demolition has to apply with all existing codes that are in effect at the time. But protection of property and free passage, this language is really intended to protect surrounding properties, whether that's private property or city resources. So the party that's responsible for conducting the demolition has to ensure that the adjacent properties won't be negatively impacted. That could be stabilizing the building so it doesn't fall in the wrong direction, or it could be protecting the city's sidewalks so we don't have to go back and replace the sidewalks that may have gotten crumbled during the demolition activity. That becomes the responsibility of the contractor. Building official may require that a fence or barricade be constructed around the work. Again, that's to protect life as well as surrounding property. Traffic on streets, roads, alleys, sidewalks, driveways, passageways, and other travel facilities, public or private, shall not be obstructed unless a permit is issued. And I will say a lot of this is language that we already have. So when in the policy and the standards that the building official issues, most of these, there's not a whole lot of change. Section 288.3, letter E, the contractor is responsible for any damage to public or private property. Utilities, common language that they have to notify the utility companies and have all utilities terminated before commencing any demolition activity. Dust control in section 288-5. Work has to be done in a manner that dust doesn't become a nuisance for the surrounding area, such as wetting down while the structure is being demolished. Removal of materials, I think it's to the meat of the ordinance language, and this is where we talk about the Mako site and the existing foundation of the paper plant and other sites. All buildings and structures shall be completely razed and all materials removed from the site and disposed of with applicable laws and regulations. All materials, whether above or below grade, shall be completely removed and disposed of properly, and nothing is to remain. And then the next sentence is important language, and we had some discussion about this. The city manager does have the authority to waive that requirement in extraordinary circumstances. An example of that is the area around the national park where the battles took place. We know that's culturally and historically sensitive areas. In some instances, like when the city has demolished structures that we purchased through the DNR trust fund, or when the Park Service goes to demolish the old visitor center, which I'm pleased to say is shortly on the horizon this fall, they will not remove the basement walls. And the purpose of that is they don't want to disturb any cultural or historic artifacts that may be in the surrounding property and risk them. So in this instance, the city manager would have the authority to waive that requirement. But in that instance, the basement must be filled in up to 4 inches below grade and then reseeded, and then also a deed. And Catherine, you may know the term better than I can, but a document has to be filed with the Register of Deeds notifying future property owners that there was that sub-terrain building that remained. So deed restriction, thank you. So it wouldn't be a surprise for future property owners that that was handled that way. But those are the circumstances where that portion of the ordinance would come into play. Explosives are prohibited unless approved and necessary by the building official. Disposal of debris must be done with applicable statutes and ordinances, federal, state, and local. All below grade spaces shall be filled with clean fill, meaning they can't be backfilled with junk. And then you put a little bit of dirt over it, plant some seed, and call it good. It has to be clean fill. The top 4 inches must be clean topsoil or some other organic material deemed appropriate by the building official, so grass and vegetation can grow appropriately to restore that site. And then no hole can be filled until it's been inspected and approved by a building inspector. So the point of this is we don't want junk getting thrown in and covered up behind our backs without us knowing. And then cleanup, all debris and equipment has to be removed, and then all trees, small trees less than 1 foot in diameter, brushes and shrubs shall be removed. That's to prevent future blighted condition. Existing legacy trees must remain only if it's smaller than 1 inch in a scrub brush tree. Otherwise, all the other trees can remain on the property. Burning prohibited, so that's not a permitted way to demolish a structure. And then permits have to be pulled and issued by the building department.
Questions for Mark? Brian?
Thank you, Your Honor. Going back to 288.3B, where it says that there's, let's see, prevent movement, settlement, etc. Is there a reasonable time frame that the person will not be put in jeopardy for such?
Yeah, so it's during when the property or when the building is being demolished itself, they have to make sure that it's going to be done in a way that doesn't jeopardize the adjacent property owner. But then also when the site is restored, it can't result in like having erosion where a building may sink over time. It has to be done in a manner that protects the property into the future as well, not just during the demo.
Well, and what I mean by that is sometimes when you do a demolition, you may actually, when you reseed, put more stuff back in that property. It can actually raise that elevation and thus make the person next to them, the owner next to them, will now have an issue with runoff going into their property.
Yes, and another issue that this may come up is particularly downtown when you demolish a building and you expose an interior wall that needs to be protected for exterior purposes. I will say, in addition to this ordinance, there are additional standards that the building official can apply. So right now, the standards for demolition doesn't include, it includes all of this, but it also includes more. So making sure that the property is restored in a way that doesn't cause blighted conditions or nuisance conditions on adjacent property is addressed in terms of what the slope, and the term is escaping my mind right now, but the engineering has to be approved as well.
That's good.
Oh, Andrew?
I guess if I can follow up a little bit on Councilman Lamore's question. If we are removing the basement and refilling it with clean dirt, but that soil is not compacted to the level that the previous soil was compacted, or the surrounding soils are compacted and there's slippage into that space, and 2 weeks later, we have movement of a wall of an adjacent building, that potentially could be seen as resulting. If that happens 5 years ago, what's the time frame that's worked into this where the demolishing party can no longer be held liable for stuff
So
like this?
the compaction is always factored into the building permit. So chances are, when you see that a site is restored, there's going to be a little bit of topsoil that sticks out above where the top of that hole was to account for that compaction going down. It's also in the city's ordinance that any adjacent property owner cannot cause a nuisance impact on an adjacent property. So if, for say, somebody demolishes a structure and the indentation exists, or the elevation causes stormwater runoff to flood a neighbor's property, that would be another violation of the ordinance, because you're not allowed to cause that. So if for some reason there was that negative impact on an adjacent property, we could still address that further down the line, not just at the time of demolition. Does that make sense? The grading.
Where is the end of that? Because a lot of in most cases that we see in the city, at the point of demolition, that property owner is now severing their relationship with the property as well. They're selling it, they're moving on from it, they're going elsewhere. So if that party was the one doing the demolition, and now 5 years later, I'm finding that my project impacted an adjacent property, it's like, where's the statute of limitations here?
Yeah, so a couple points to that. When the city completes a demolition, it may be on our own property for whatever reason. But if it's in the instance where the city orders a property to be demolished, the property owner isn't relinquishing their property rights to the city unless they sign that over. So if we order a property demolished, they are responsible to be the one to do the demolition. If they don't, then the city will do it and invoice the property owner. And then they have to pay that. Otherwise, it goes on their tax bill. So if a structure is demolished, it's not always the case that the city immediately takes ownership of the property and then we do it. Certainly, if there's an instance where the city on our own property demolished a structure, and for some reason there's cause that the property owner thinks we were deficient in our site restoration, it's causing problems, we can have those conversations. But a statute of limitations, most of the time that would become a dispute between private property owners, and the city wouldn't get involved unless we were the ones doing the demolition ourselves.
I think I understand what Andrew's saying.
Mhm.
There's got to be some end game here, whereas they are no longer responsible after a certain time frame, or if it does, like Andrew said, 5 years down the road, I've got a sinkhole that just basically went in after so much rain came through on the property, which obviously was caused by the demolition of that property. So now you have a situation where we granted that person, or that owner of that company, to do the demolition. They demolished the property. It's all gone. 5 years later, we got the problem stippling up, and they're gone. They're out of the picture. They're defunct, whatever. Who's responsible for that homeowner's damage because of the sinkhole that was created, now creating more problems for that homeowner next door, I guess is the question. And if I understand it correctly, there really is no recourse for that homeowner.
So I'm not a lawyer.
I think,
Okay.
if there's a continuing, for example,
the idea that the property is higher and so it's gonna cause a flow of water. That property owner continues to be liable for that flow of water. I think a lot of the ideas you're talking about is really, can be very fact specific. Did they do something to alter it after the initial demolition that would bring the liability in? Was there a 100-year flood rain? All those facts are likely to come into what's causing this change. I mean, you've got the initial permit, the idea this and this and this needs to be done, right? The compaction needs to be done. The wall needs to be braced. All of those, at what time period? Is there a time period that the city says we allow for natural settlement, freezing, thawing, right? It might take a year that you have the responsibility, Mr. Permit Holder, to continue to do this. And then at what point, you're asking good questions, it's just kind of fact specific of what could then happen after the permit is satisfied by the city.
Yeah, and if the property owner who completed the demolition pulled the permit, 5 years from now, that person is no longer the owner of the property and there's an issue, that becomes a dispute of private property claims that the two would have to work out. And like I said, unless the city is the owner.
Well, I guess the other question would be, do we have any responsibility by issuing a permit as well?
So as long as, if the property owner pulls the permit, follows all of our standards, follows the ordinance, we would close the permit out. If 5 years from now something happens and the property didn't take, I think as Catherine indicated, that's a case by case circumstance we would have to deal with in the meantime. But I'll say at the same time, these standards have been the ones we've been following for years and haven't had that come up, but certainly it's not to say it never will. And I'd say too, that's why property insurance is always recommended, whether you're the city or private property owner to dispute those claims. But we would deal with those on a case by case and look at other factors, as Catherine indicated, that may not be caused from the demolition, but other concerns.
I think one aspect is that strikes me is looking in the hole before it's filled.
Yeah.
I mean, people found a number of things that they didn't know was under their property that came from old demolitions that caused problems. So that's a great aspect of this ordinance, that they know what's in the hole.
Well, and I think to kind of address like a statute of limitations question, I think it all comes down to reasonableness. And I think there are certain court rules about when, if you've got a lawsuit against somebody in some sort of, it depends on the facts of each individual case. But for example, if it's a demolition of a building that occurred 30 years ago, and then all of a sudden now you have a property owner saying, oh yeah, now now there's water getting into my building because you demolitioned this 30 years ago. Well, that becomes an issue that certainly they can always initiate a lawsuit. They can always do that. However, it's the cases, it's that buildup of the case and the evidence that the judge would have to decide, say, yeah, you're not liable something 30 years later because it was demolished. I think, and certainly any kind of a statute of limitations on any of this wouldn't be appropriate to have in an ordinance.
Well, and I guess my issue would be liability on the city. The one that would outlast probably all the property owners would be the city, and we are the ones issuing the permit. So that's just my concern as far as that goes. To make sure we kind of relinquish as much liability as possible for a situation that we basically didn't create. All we're doing is trying to help them get to the point where they want to go.
And I think the ordinance itself is a better protection than what we do now.
Well, 100%.
Because
I'm
we
just
are
trying
still liable, even if we didn't have this ordinance, and just by going through the national building code or whatever, that still makes us as liable that way as it does an ordinance. At least with an ordinance, we have a checks and balances on the people who are demolishing this to ensure that everything's been removed based on the best practice of doing demolitions.
And consistency.
And consistency for everybody.
Yeah, and it's not, I agree with this. I really agree that we need this. That's not the issue. The issue is just, do we need more to help give it more of a lining for us. That's the only thing I was asking.
Okay.
Andrew?
Yes, while we're on the topic of reasonable timeframes, I see sections in here on cleanup, debris removal, and removal of materials. There's no specific time frame on when the demolished materials have to be removed. Do we want one? Is there a reason that there isn't one? Do we need to implement one?
So given the fact somebody has to have a demolition permit, those permits are only good for a certain period of time. I think it's 120 days. And so if it's not closed out within 120 days, if they haven't completed all the work, then we would pursue our normal course of action. If there's an outstanding permit that hasn't been final inspected, typically we remind somebody they need to close out their permit, schedule the final inspections. They've got the opportunity to renew that for a certain period of time at the discretion of the building official. Otherwise, if they don't and they haven't completed the work, then that's another conversation we're having with Catherine and Matt.
Very good. And then a question on the disconnections, the utility disconnections from the buildings. It says utility shall obtain release from the utility company certifying that the service is not connected. Is that included even when, say we're demolishing a shed? There's no services that go to a shed.
Right.
I still need to go contact all the utility companies, or am I good for the shed? Or does it encompass the entire property because there's utilities going to my house that's on the same property,
Yeah.
even though it's not to this outbuilding?
And that's a good point. Dig always needs to be called for any demolitions, and that's in part of the document that the building official enforces out in addition to the ordinance. So an example like Frenchman's Bend where their utilities are buried, there may be utilities buried in the backyard if they're demolishing a shed that they may hit. So they need to call Dig and make sure that that clearance is received. In terms of residential or other commercial structures, sometimes we make the service cut at the street. Sometimes we leave it in place to the meter pit. Depending on if there may be a future development at the site, we don't want to have them run all those utilities again. So it depends on the characteristic of the site in terms of where the utilities are actually cut. But typically it's standard. Water is at the curb. All electricity is removed to the pole for the safety of everybody involved, and same with gas.
Other questions? Very well. Mark, thank you. Manager Robinson?
Oh, Mark's doing such a good job so far. I do have a couple things that have come up that I think should be part of our discussions. And one of I figured we'd have time because ordinances don't take that long. So we're going to discuss the Sawyer houses. As you'll see in the consent agenda tonight, we have a contract to be approved for OBR, Ohio Building Restoration Company, to do work that is beyond what we knew needed to be done at the Sawyer house. And we, Mark and his crew created a kind of a slide or a PowerPoint presentation for you to show why we need that work. And we figured if we had time here at this meeting, this would be a good time to discuss it with you.
Mark?
Okay, so in tonight's agenda, as the city manager indicated, there's a proposal with a contract with Ohio Building Restoration regarding work that needs to be done at the Sawyer House. Last year, the city received and city council accepted a $20,000 grant from the Monroe County Museum System to do some work on the windows and other structural issues at the Sawyer House, primarily reglazing the windows, painting the windows, and some other work. As most property owners can attest, once you start something, you find surprises. And unfortunately, we found some surprises with the Sawyer House. And so we've got a $20,000 grant, but at the same time, there's a proposal from Ohio Building Restoration for $75,509 to do some additional repairs that we're going to walk through with you this evening so that you have a good understanding. Pictures are always worth 1,000 words. And so here was the intent of some of the work that we wanted to do. You'll see some of the wood is aging and deteriorating around the windows. need to be scraped, the wood repaired, the windows reglazed. And so this was the impetus for the project. Unfortunately, they found much of the wood components were deteriorating quite rapidly. In this picture, the windowsill is rotted, a portion removed and was being prepped for replacement. Flaking and peeling paint on the window and trim of the bay window, unfortunately, is indicative of water infiltration. So sealing around the windows. Once the work got started, they came back to us with a change order of about $3,300 to do some additional caulking and sealing to try and prevent that water intrusion around the windows. Here you can see, if you look closely, the front porch shows the trim on the base of the column was separating within that red circle. This was a photo that was submitted as part of the grant application. And you'll see as they started to prepare the columns to paint, the wood had dry rotted and it was actually crumbling. And so there's no point in trying to paint over crumbled wood, but it also raised some structural concerns with the columns themselves on the front porch of the Sawyer house. They were removed to the point where the wood was solid before rebuilding, but the further they got in, you can see the deterioration was much more behind than just behind the paint and the sheathing. And so some woodwork had been rebuilt with milled lumber. Some of the porch decking also had to be replaced. And so OBR, finally we got to the point where we said, we need a full proposal. This is clearly not just painting windows anymore, but also at the same time, the work has to be addressed, otherwise it's going to continue to deteriorate rapidly, both in the wet conditions of the summer and the upcoming winter conditions. And so you'll see some of the items, the pillar that was supposed to be holding the roof over the porch was not even attached to the porch roof anymore. Dry rot was found at the top of the column. Peeling paint around the eaves indicated that the eaves were failing and water was infiltrating around the eaves and running down the house itself, causing the wood to rot. Peeling paint. Additionally, you can see some of this around the eaves, and this was identified. We noticed that the eaves troughs needed to be cleaned out through routine maintenance. And when DPS went over to do it, that's when they discovered some of the damage around the eaves at the top of the house itself. A bird had found its way and nested in one of the holes around the eaves in the top of the house. You'll see here we were creating wildlife habitat, but you also see that the eave was not connected to the downspout either. And so some of that work was repaired immediately to try and stop further damage. But repairs to the round arch around the front porch, some of which had been completed. But not all the work had been done because we said we've clearly spent beyond the $20,000 of the grant. And so, again, that's when OBR sent over the proposal that's on tonight's agenda for City Council. But we did meet City Manager Robinson and I met with Director Edsel. Said we all agreed that the work needed to be done due to the rapid deterioration condition at the house. And so the agreement tonight, $20,000 from the museum system, with the rest coming from the capital projects fund balance that we have funds available. However, City Council has to authorize the finance director to make that transfer from the capital fund balance into the building maintenance account for the Sawyer house. Brackets are failing, holding the eaves up. So some of the fascia was falling and crumbling around the top as well that were holding the eaves. Plus it was also here, this was above the barrier-free entrance as well, the handicapped entrance into the Sawyer house. And then holes in the eaves troughs themselves that had either been rusted through. Oops. And then a future project, we also discovered that some of the brick around the chimney was starting to fail and crumble as well. So this will be identified for a future project, not as part of the $75,000 application, but likely to be a CIP that's submitted as part of this year's capital improvements program. Some additional brickwork and tuck pointing. That's all the photos.
So I see there's several council members going to ask a question, getting ready. But I see this is item 4856, which is under the consent agenda. Is that the correct item?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Councilwoman, or Michelle?
Thank you. Are we going to be able to maintain the historical integrity of the home at that price?
Yes.
It's
So
awfully inexpensive with all of that woodwork.
5,000. All the repairs it's going to be restoring, similar to what was shown in one of the earlier pictures where they repaired the column at the base, replacing it exactly as it was.
Wow.
And actually, OBR, the contractor who is doing that, the Ohio Building Restoration, that is what their specialty is historic building restoration.
And the same material? Will it be the same material? Thank you.
Right now, they're in town doing work on the Monroe Optical Building with the DDA, doing the brick restoration work. So that was also why we're bringing it to you to complete the project in full, because they're already in town. If we have them come back later, it may result in additional mobilization costs. One of the options that we had was to complete some of the work this year, utilizing the grant and funds that we had budgeted, and then come back and do more next year. But given the significant deterioration that's occurred already, and the fact to save future mobilization costs, we all agreed it was good to make a recommendation to council just to get it wrapped up all at the same time and completed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I hope this is not like a Band-Aid, because it looks like there's a lot of money there to be repaired.
Mhm.
OBR is very reputable, so I have no problem with them doing the work. Looking at that brickwork, though, that brick is going to take some time as well. Did they give you a roundabout estimate as to what they're thinking about for the brick, or is that you're just thinking about the chimney, or are you thinking about the whole building and the structure?
Yeah, that's a great point. So one of the things that Lauren and I are working on for all of our city facilities are to figure out what are the needs, the condition, and the condition assessment and the needs for every city facility. Jeff Green has been integral and helpful with this project, working with OBR. And so we're doing the same thing with the Sawyer House, figuring out what is the routine maintenance we need to do a better job of staying on top of. Lauren's doing a great job in visiting and working on every city facility, trying to put all of our city facilities on the same standard maintenance schedule. Part of this is lack of maintenance over the years that is now catching up with us. And so we'll be putting together with Jeff, particularly from a historic preservation standpoint, to your point, Councilwoman Germaini, to figure out what are all the needs for the Sawyer House that are coming up on the horizon we need to be aware of and start planning and budgeting for. And we're doing that with City Hall, with the ALCC, or the Dorsch Library, all the facilities.
I mean, as far as the paint that they're suggesting, is it? I just want something that's going to last and be, resistant to a lot of the weathering. And I know that I trust whatever they say, because they are, like I said, they're very reputable. I have no problem with them doing the work. Just a little bit of a concern, because obviously we got a lot of aging going on, and it's just showing more so in the last 10 to 15 years than it had prior to that. And maybe it is the maintenance may help, but this may be coming up more frequently than we want. And I'm thinking, is there any other longer lasting solution that may help the lack of, or take away some of that weathering process?
Yeah, and a couple good points out of that. One, we had to, as part of the museum system grant, we had to turn in for 3 proposals. OBR was obviously the one that we recommended because of the outstanding work they do that holds up, and their knowledge and both masonry and historic preservation work to make sure it's cared for generations to come. But in terms of the overall work that's needed at the Sawyer House, there is a lot there. And part of, I think, the damage that we're seeing on the house right now is indicative of the failure to maintain the property. So by having a routine schedule to get up and clean the eaves trough to prevent ice jams that damage the downspouts that then cause the water to run down and damage that wood quicker than what it should, I think is what the intent with the project that Lauren and I are working on, to make sure that, especially as resources become tighter in the future, we got to make sure that we're maintaining what we have to prevent significant repairs in the future all at once.
Other questions? Mike?
Just want to follow back up. Is this everything known that needs to be repaired at the time, other than the tuck pointing in the chimney?
So these are the most urgent related to the grant project that we have with the museum system. There are other needs that we know of. I think some of the work that the city has done over the past several years, the bathroom was replaced in the apartment upstairs. Certainly when the attic caught fire, there was significant work done to the roof and the attic restoration at that time. And so these are what we know of, and that they've encountered the worst of the worst, as DPS has been in the upper portions of the facility, identifying the significant deficiencies, and the work that OBR is doing, bringing to our attention what the worst of the worst is and needs addressed in the immediate future.
Thank you.
So I think back, most on the council here, when we had the Dorsch Library, and it had very similar, if not even more so than this, as that came forward. And once you start, it just continues on and goes right through. So that entranceway was pretty much redone completely.
Yeah.
And I think it's about the maintenance and it's about the inspection. So I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Other questions? Manager Robinson,
Thanks, Mark.
one more?
The last item I'd like to address and just bring you some information. I left you all a handout at your seat, as well as I just emailed you several hours ago on this. But I know that many of you have received an email from a resident who is vehemently against the ordinance that we passed that allows controlled outdoor burning. And, I know after receiving this, I had asked the Director of Public Safety, who had Commander Smiley go through and dig up what our statistics were for the number of complaints that we've received, the number of citations that we've issued, and everything relating to this issue. Well, one of the specific emails brought up a fire particulate pollutant that comes from basically burning anything. And I know that Commander Smiley did the research and is well aware of this. And I wanted for you to be able to ask him about this, let him explain what this actually is that has been brought up by this resident, to make sure that you have all the information should you decide to reply. Yeah.
Commander, welcome.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, City Council, Clerk Treasurer, Scott Smiley, Fire Commander, Monroe Public Safety Department. So yes, as the City Manager indicated, PM 2.5 is what the citizen is complaining about. And this is a particulate matter, and the 2.5 is the size of this particular particulate. And it's from combustion. Anywhere from burning gasoline, oil, diesel fuel, wood, other fuels, running your vehicle, home heating, and small businesses. You get it also from construction, dust, gravel pits, wildfires, which we experienced last year, the Canadian wildfires where they had the health advisories, major amounts of air pollution at that point, agricultural, if you burn candles in your home, incense, cooking, those all produce PM 2.5. Very small amounts. The most of the pollution comes from larger industries, the coal burner plant, Detroit Edison, Gerdau Steel with the smelting of metals. So the PM 2.5 is all around us. The recreational burning that she's referring to, in my opinion, is a very, very small amount of pollution. You can see by the other sources there, a fire that you have in your backyard isn't going to create the amounts of pollution that these others produce. So there's also just environmental gases, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and VOCs, the volatile organic compounds, which are all around us. Certain conditions, they intertwine, react against each other, and produce the PM 2.5. So there's no getting away from it. And the recreational fires that she's referring to is not a factor. Is not a factor, at least for health conditions in the city of Monroe.
So I also seen your reports. Thank you very much for the information and I'll say the details about it. At the beginning of your report, it talks about the, I'll say the violations that have been responding to.
Yes.
And also that you're not getting return visits necessarily, and that the numbers of responding calls as we work our way through this policy and response from yourself and the fire department, and that it's seems to be less that are inappropriately burning.
Correct. And when we do go out to these sites, we educate the citizens on the ordinance and the proper procedure and the containers they can burn in, the materials they can burn. And in 2023, we responded to 24 calls. And out of those 24 calls, 8 citations were given in 2023. In 2024 to date, we responded to 18, and 3 citations were given so far this year. And as you stated, the repeat offenders, we may be called back to the residents' homes for complaints, but we find them in compliance with the ordinance at that point after we educate them. So there is no citations or anything given at that point. And in 2023 and 24, there have been no repeat offenses.
If I recall the policy correctly, it's pretty specific on what should not be burned for a recreational fire pit. That has to be approved also. It's not just a hole in the ground. So
Correct.
is that correct? Right?
Yes, yeah. It's only clean wood, clean firewood. No brush, no leaves, no building materials, things of that nature.
Painted wood from, like you said, building materials have never been removed.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Questions? Andrew?
Thank you, Commander Smiley, for looking into this and providing us this this brief that you've prepared. Is there an air quality standard that is mandated at certain metric levels by the EPA or another governmental entity?
Yes, there is. I don't have the exact numbers for that, but on the Michigan Department of Environmental, Great Lakes, and Energy, EGLE, they address, along with the State Fire Marshal's Office, about campfires, and the air quality regulations permit the burning of logs, brush, charcoal, and other similar materials for the proposed purpose of preparation and recreation, unless prohibited by local law. So even they weigh in on saying recreational fires are okay as long as the local ordinance is approved.
Do we in the city monitor in any way air quality standards?
No, not that I'm aware of.
And to your knowledge, are we outside of the regular bounds of any air quality standards that you're aware of?
No, because they are monitored. Obviously, with the Canadian fires that I referenced earlier, those air qualities are monitored, and there are health advisories put out when the air quality is bad. All the weather stations, they monitor that, and they put out their recommendations and tell you the quality of air.
Okay.
But the city itself that I'm aware of does not.
It's a good question, and I know that SEMCOG also puts out reports of air quality, and there's actually funding for CMAQ funds to, if there's a issue that a community had to deal with. There wasn't long ago there from the Detroit metropolitan area, because of analysis that was done. SEMCOG and others had asked that it be revisited, and found out that the reports weren't quite exactly where they should be, and so the extension of another I don't know, a year or two, that they have to, from collectively, or the emissions of cars would have to go back and be inspected for emissions of those that are old enough, and I see some aren't, of having to take your car in to have an emissions check on it, was also almost instituted this year or for next year. But revisiting it from other, I'll say, benefits, improvements, that was still being looked at, of course, but not not above the level. Michelle, you had a question?
Do you have any concentrated areas within our city that have more concern than others, or is it pretty much across the board?
For residential, no, I wouldn't say. I would say most of our, if we had concerns, it would be more of the industry,
That's a
the
given,
industrial
but residential wise, there's no concentrated areas that you're aware of.
aware of, no.
Thank you.
Last I recall would have been on Huber Drive when we had the um, I'll say the buildings there that have since changed over.
Roofing materials.
Yeah, building materials, thank you, that's what it was, and then there was some burning and other items, and it was championed by a former councilwoman and the council at the time, and resolved that. And of course, it then moved on with not only ceasing that operation, but the building being repurposed for a new business and company. So that's the last I recall that we had a significant amount of burning and odor coming from I'll say commercial or manufacturing. So
Yeah, and we respond to all calls. Every call that gets called into a complaint that a citizen calls into 911, we respond to all of them and investigate.
Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Commander Smiley, have you or one of your department members gone to the complainant and basically responded with this information to them to show them what we came up with in our findings?
Not since this has come out, not since this briefing's come out. We've had many dealings with certain citizens, and we've tried to educate them. And they're some people prefer not to have recreational burning in the city, and that's kind of what we're dealing with.
Might be something that we might want to do, just to reach out to them and say, hey, this is what we have, and the majority of the citizens do want this. And by the way, these are the facts that back that up.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Other questions? Thanks, Commander Smiley.
Thank you.
Manager Robinson, further?
Well, Your Honor, that's all we have to present at the work session tonight, unless council finds something in the agenda that they would like to go over to seek a little more information on
Sure.
prior to our break.
So I'll see if any council members have anything on the consent or any of the items, council action or presentations that's on the agenda for questions prior to us adjourning this meeting and getting ready for the council meeting. Any thoughts or any comments or questions on the items? I always want to ask the clerk, because clerk, if there's any additional, okay. Any other comments then for the work session?
I
So
have
did-
none, sir.
You have no more? So I didn't do it at the beginning of the meeting, so I'll do it at the end of the meeting. And it's always public comment for the work session and the items that were on the agenda there, or if there's another comment on the work session. Any comments from the public for the work session? And obviously, we'll have our meeting here in the next 28 minutes. Comments from the public? Seeing none? If there's no other comments from council? I'll adjourn the city council work session, and we'll be back at 7:30. Thank you. Call the city council meeting to order. 1 second, clerk, if you'd call the roll. A lot of great conversation going on at the start of the meeting, so thank you for the Millward for letting us know. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Biding. Germaini.
Here.
Lamore. Felder.
Excused.
Hayter.
Here.
Stilgrave. Here. Mayor Clark.
Here, I'd ask we all please rise for the invocation, remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Guide us in our deliberations and discussions this evening. May our efforts promote the good of the residents of this city and all who visit.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, first item, please.
Item on the agenda is the approval of the regular agenda.
Thank you. City Manager Robinson, any adjustments to the agenda?
Your Honorable Mayor, we don't have any adjustments to the agenda.
Any comments from the council for the agenda? Seeing none, a motion would be in order to approve the agenda.
Your Honor, I'd like to approve the agenda as written.
Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Germaini, to approve the regular agenda. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaini.
Yes.
Lamore. Hayter. Stilgrave.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes. Next item, please.
The next item is the consent agenda, and for item B, approval of payments, the amount should read $3,437,883.12, 3437,883.12.
Thank you. Are there any items on the consent agenda that council wishes to have pulled for further discussion? Any items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any items on the consent agenda those present here this evening wish to have pulled for further discussion? I see we have a few new people here this evening. If there's an item on the consent agenda you want to have conversation about, now would be the time to ask that it be pulled for discussion. If not, it gets approved during the consent agenda, which all items on the consent agenda get approved at the same time. So any items on the consent agenda, those present here this evening? Seeing none? Councilman Lamore?
Yes, Your Honor. I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as written and all the motions and items in the consent agenda be carried out and the actions recorded by the clerk.
Support.
Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilman Hayter, that all items on the consent agenda be accepted, placed on file, recommendations carried out, and resolutions adopted. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaini.
Yes.
Lamore.
Yes.
Hayter. Stilgrave.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes. Next item, please.
The next item is under presentations, communications, and public hearings. The first item is item 4853, Kiwanis Club of Monroe's 90th Anniversary Proclamation.
Thank you. We have several items on this presentations, communications, and public hearings. And I'm going to ask that the president, Jacob Waltz, meet me at the podium, and I want to talk about the proclamation for the Kiwanis Club. Jacob, welcome.
Thank
Go right here. You notice I usually say present, but I said talk about because I'm not going to present it this evening, but I thought it was important with all the members of the Kiwanis that are here and also the great organization it is and all the service that they've done to our city, that at least talk about this for a couple minutes because I come here on the 18th of September, they're having a special meeting and function that this will officially be presented on behalf of the city council. So the proclamation speaks to about the Kiwanis Club having their 90th anniversary, and it was on September 18th. No, I'm sorry, it was August 31st. Sorry, I got it right here. So back on August 31st of 1934 is when they started as a local network of community leaders and volunteers to give back to the community. And for 90 years, that's exactly what Kiwanis has done. You look across our community, and there's items that are past, but also present in which the Kiwanis was involved with. And I'm just going to make a comment to one because it might have got somewhat overlooked when we did Father Carnes Park. And Father Carnes Park, of course, as we know, we revitalized all that. Father Carnes was a Kiwanis. If I'm not mistaken, he was the president at one time. And it was the construction of the playground and the wading pool was originally there because of Father Carnes and the Kiwanis. But there's many other items with the campfire cabin in North Custer, the Johnson Finney building, and work done that was moved to the 2nd Street, the Little Brown Bear House at the Monroe County Fairgrounds. The list goes on. I'm not going to read it all. As I said, they're very active in 4-H auctions and also sponsors numerous anti-drug and alcohol programs for elementary age school children. I'm going to stop there because it talks about proclaiming their anniversary date for this proclamation. But I want to give Jacob an opportunity to say what he wants to say as the president of Kiwanis to us for us this evening. Jake,
Appreciate
any
it, Mayor
comments?
Clark. Mayor Clark, thank you. It is an honor to be the president working into the 90th year, and there's a bunch of Kiwanians in here tonight with a ton of service years in our organization, and the big thing, just serving the children of the world. So I think we do a really good job. I've only been a blip of that little bit of 5 years in the club, but doing service for Special Olympics, Salvation Army. I know I'm missing a ton on everything too, but there's a lot of projects that we've done throughout the years that has helped the community out really well. So I give thanks to all the Kiwanians in here tonight to give me the honor of being president and to kind of follow in their footsteps of helping the city of Monroe, to help the community, and to help all the kids out as well. So thank you, Mayor Clark.
Well, Jacob, thanks you. And this is not a tease. I will see you on the 18th, and I'll make
Yeah.
sure that we present it formally to all your members as well as to the those that you're inviting to your gala. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here, and thank
Yep.
all the Kiwanis for being here. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is item 4837, public hearing for proposed ordinance 24-005. And there are no comments on file in the clerk treasurer's office.
Thank you. At this time, I'll open the public hearing for proposed ordinance 24-005, public hearing to receive and review comments of the written ordinance to amend section 570-26 within chapter 570 of the Monroe Code. Any comments from those present that are here this evening regarding this public hearing? Any comments for the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is item 4851, public hearing for proposed ordinance 24-006, and there are no comments on file in the clerk's office.
Thank you. At this time, I'll open the public hearing regarding proposed ordinance 24-006, ordinance to amend Section 2 of the zoning districts of Chapter 720 of the Code of the City of Monroe, proposed changes to the zoning 2020 B Battlefield District. Any comments from those present here this evening? Comments? Please step forward. Your name, please, and if you have comments on the public hearing.
Connor Veenstra. I have more of just a question of what it is and what it would do.
Well, it's in the fact sheet. It's in the information of the fact sheet, obviously beyond the agenda.
Okay.
But I know that it designates area. Give me a second. Go to the correct page because it's later. It's going to come up later on agenda. I know Mr. Cochran's sitting there watching me, waiting for me to find this when he could get up and say it. And I don't have to look up to see that.
Oh, I see.
Do you see it?
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was going to be presented on later.
Yeah, it'll be later on the agenda for, hold on one second. I want to get this correct. It's on, it's on the agenda for council action, and it'll be opportunities for questions or comments if you have that. But it'll talk, it's basically identifying areas within the battlefield district as we currently have and amending that to bring it up to date with identifying specific areas within the Heritage Corridor Plan in the battlefield district. gives more designation for how things will be developed. That's just a brief comment.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you. My
Thank you.
apologies for
No
the
problem, Connor.
redundancy.
Thank you for asking. Other comments regarding this public hearing? Seeing no further, close the public hearing. Clerk, next item, please.
Is item 4855, Draft Opportunity Center at ALCC budget for fiscal year 24-25.
Well, City Manager Robinson, this is a communication sent to council. Is that correct? It's the draft budget for the upcoming fiscal year?
Yes, Your Honor, as every year, along with the quarterly updates that MCOP provides to the city council, they are also required to provide us with their draft budget. And this is a copy of their draft budget, as you will see, for all the programs and their funding sources, et cetera, are included within their budget. And it just serves as a communication to council that the word draft means it's a draft because it has yet to be approved by their own board at this time, but they provide it for your information.
So this will come back to council at a later date if finalized? Or is it, this
I
is what
believe
we're
so,
giving
yes.
our input at this time, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll say it's a communication. Any comments from council regarding this communication?
Just to clarify, the council does not actually approve their budget. They just have to provide it.
Correct, because we have an agreement with the program to manage the facility, the LCC, and of course, this is their obligation to service with this and make any thoughts or recommendations. So as it being a draft and still has a date that's pending for their meeting, if there's comments, please send those along. If you have those later to the city manager so they can be added, would be great. No action is required by council unless desired. If not, it's a communication. We'll move forward if there's no comments from council. Very well. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is item 4867. It's a proposed ordinance 24-006, which is up for its first reading and to set the final reading. And I just wanted to call council's attention to this. It's a little different than what we usually do. We're not setting the public hearing because obviously we had that tonight. So it's just first reading and setting the final reading for our next meeting. So it's a little different. I just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page.
Yes, thank you, because we have another one that's a little bit different after
Yep.
it's than
Right.
normally. So there's this city council action for the purpose stated, and we'll need a motion to continue. Councilwoman Germaini.
I'll make a motion, move the proposed ordinance 24-006 be placed on the floor for its first reading and that the final reading be scheduled for September 16th, 2024.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Germaini, supported by Councilwoman Stilgrave. Item 4867, proposed ordinance 24-006 for first reading and set final reading date. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaini?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Hayter?
Yes.
Stilgrave?
Yes.
Mayor Clark? Ordinance 24-006, an ordinance to amend Section 2 zoning districts of Chapter 720 of the Code of the City of Monroe.
Next item, please.
The next item is item 4866, proposed ordinance 24-007, up for its first reading and setting the public hearing and final reading for this evening.
Very good. Any questions from council? If not, motion to move forward. And Councilman Hayter?
I'll make a motion that the proposed ordinance 24-007 be placed on the floor for its first reading and that the public hearing and final reading be scheduled for September 16th, 2024.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Hayter, supported by Councilman Lamore, on item 4866, proposed ordinance 24-007, first reading and public hearing and final reading scheduled. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaini?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Hayter? Stilgrave?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please.
I'll just take a
Oh,
moment.
I'm
for the
sorry.
reading.
I-
That's okay.
I went too fast. I
Ordinance
apologize.
24-007, Chapter 288, Demolition Requirements and Standards. An ordinance to add Chapter 288, Demolition Requirements and Standards of the Code of the City of Monroe.
Thank you. Now, next item, please.
Next item is item 4790, Construction Manager at-Risk Contract, Opportunity Center, and Navarre Library Expansion Project.
Thank you. City Manager Robinson, introduction or comments?
Yes, Your Honor and Council, this is a management agreement with the George W. Auk Company for the construction management services to the final review and approved by the city attorney, city manager. And this is for them to do the actual starting of the bid process, et cetera, for the construction work at the ALCC Navarre Library project.
Questions from council for manager? I just gonna make a quick comment because this agreement that's being proposed, it's a continuation as we move forward with the ALCC project, and we've had many discussions, many meetings, many work sessions. This is the next step to move forward. Having this construction manager at risk contract allows us to have a guaranteed price for what determination of the cost, but also this is the same company that the city had a relationship and contractual relationship when the fire station was built. And so they have a track record not only here within our city, but elsewhere about management. So I thought I'd throw that in there as well. Any comments from council? If not, a motion would be in order.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion to approve the agreement with George W. Auk Company for construction management services, subject to final review and approval by the city attorney and city manager, that the director of engineering and public services or his designee be authorized to sign any necessary documents, that $30,825 be allocated for pre-construction services, that the requirement for submission of pre-qualification materials under the responsible bidder ordinance be modified to include only those bidders being considered for award, and that the city manager be granted the authority to waive the terms of the ordinance for any particular bid package for the reasons delineated above.
Motion by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Steelgrave. On item 4790, construction manager Rick's contract opportunity center of our library expansion project. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Hayter?
Yes.
Steelgrave?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please.
Next item is item 4857, Proposed License Agreement with Monroe Public Schools.
City Manager Robinson.
Yes, Your Honor, we had a work session where we discussed this licensing agreement with the Monroe Public Schools in order for them to have a license agreement on our property at Manor Park in order to construct a driveway, a one-way driveway coming off of Donna Lee, and to allow for a less congested traffic solution and safer solution for student drop-off for the Monroe Public Schools.
Thank you. Any questions from council? A motion, Councilman Hayter.
I make a motion to approve the proposed license agreement with Monroe Public Schools regarding parcel number 69-00333-306.
Second.
This is a motion by Councilman Hayter, supported by Councilman Lamore. Item 4857, proposed license agreement with Monroe Public Schools. Clerk, please call the roll.
Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Hayter? Steelgrave? Mayor Clark?
Yes, and I just want to add a comment that those that may not have been able to watch be here for the work session or watch, it will be obviously replayed. The opportunity is there to see some of the lengthy discussions about the construction location and how it's going to improve the flow for not only the students, the neighborhood as well, and that contacts have been made with the residents for support and comments about the change in drop-off and pickup for students. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is item 4841, Acceptance of Monroe County Museum System Grant.
Manager Robinson, any comments?
Yes, Your Honor, we have been awarded the grant from the Monroe County Museum System in the amount of $20,000 and to be earmarked for the Woodland Cemetery Gateway project, which is to replace the chain link fencing with a more aesthetically pleasing fence. And the estimated cost of the project is $28,375, requiring a contribution of the city for $8,375. And it's this to start getting to the point where we're completing the upgrades to Woodland Cemetery.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, motion? Councilwoman Stalgrave?
I'll make the motion to move to accept the MCMS grant, authorize the city manager to sign the necessary grant agreements, and authorize the assistant city manager, finance director to amend the budget for the grant acceptance. Support.
Motion by Councilwoman Stalgrave, supported by Councilwoman Germaini on item 4841, acceptance of the Monroe County Museum Systems Grant. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaini?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Hayter?
Yes.
Steelgrave?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please.
The next item is proposed ordinance 24-005, which is up for its final reading.
Your Honor, as I know that there has been question from the individual counter in the audience, not knowing exactly what this ordinance is, I'd like to ask Director Leroy to be able to come up and to discuss exactly what this ordinance is so that everybody understands what it's regulating.
Your Mayor, good evening, Mayor and Council. Barry Leroy, Director of Water and Wastewater for the city. Ordinance 24-005 is amending the current sewer ordinance, and it's tied in with our national pollutant discharge elimination system permit. We were required to evaluate several analytes with our current permit, and PFOA, PFOS, and PCBs were included in them. When we went through what's called a maximum allowable headworks loading evaluation, it was determined that two of those required us to establish local limits, so that way we didn't have any pass-through and then be in non-compliance with our permit with Department of Eagle. So this ordinance is establishing two local limits in our sewer use ordinance. There will be likely one industrial pretreatment customer that will likely be affected, that they'll have to install removal equipment with their IP. They're an industrial pretreatment customer, so they have a permit with us specifically to remove toxins before they discharge to us. So they'll have to make the necessary improvements to remove that, to knock it down below that level, so we don't have any pass through. So, but that's what the ordinance is establishing.
Thank you. I'm going to make a clarification because when Connor came up, I spoke about two proposed ordinance 24-006. Just for everybody's clarification, that was the first reading this evening. That's just as the clerk had said. And the final reading is scheduled for September 16th. So that'll come back at that time. That's about the 006, about the battlefield property. But since we have an ordinance on here that's going to be up for final reading and action, I appreciate the city manager for everybody's information, understanding that when an ordinance comes up, we have the opportunity to speak specifically what it's to, even though we've had conversation at previous meetings. Any questions for Director Leroy? Any questions for Director Leroy? Very good. So thank you, Barry. Appreciate it. Manager Robinson, anything further?
The administration has no further items this evening.
Make a motion for this.
Councilwoman Germain?
Thank you, Your Honor. Proposed ordinance 24-005 up for its final reading. Move to place proposed ordinance 24-005 on the floor for its final reading.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Germain, supported by Councilman Lamore. Item 4818, proposed ordinance 24-005 for its final reading.
Germaini?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Hayter?
Yes.
Steelgrave?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes.
Ordinance 24-005, an ordinance to amend sections 570-26 of Chapter 570 Sewers of the Monroe Code, the City of Monroe ordains.
This ordinance pass.
Councilperson Germaini,
Yes.
Lamore,
Yes.
Hayter, Steelgrave, Mayor Clark.
Yes. Next item, please.
I have no further items this evening, Your Honor.
Council comments. Councilwoman Germaini, comments this evening.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, I want to thank the Public Safety Department for that report on the smoke. That was very informative and cleared a lot of heads. Secondly, as the next president of Kiwanis on the 18th, I'll get installed, and we actually have 4 members here on the council. I want to thank this council and the mayor for the ordinance, and it's a great club to be with, and it's an honor to work with the Kiwanis Club, and it's an honor to be on this council. And thank you, everybody. That's all.
Councilman Lamore.
Thank you, Your Honor. I hope everybody enjoyed their Labor Day weekend and got rested up for pushing through into the upcoming winter that we're going to have here. And I also want to congratulate Kiwanis on their 90th anniversary. It's a great achievement. It's very difficult to be a member of any club and find any youth in their club. But it seems like hopefully you guys are getting through and people are coming out and supporting the Kiwanis, because it is a great organization, and I appreciate everything you have done and are doing for our community. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. Councilman Hayter.
I also want to thank Kiwanis and congratulate them on their 90 years of service to this community. And I'd like to thank everybody that came out for Labor Day. I hope everybody had a good time that was able to make it out this weekend, and we much appreciate it. And we'll see everybody next year.
Councilwoman Stalgrave.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, as the current treasurer of Kiwanis, big kudos to these guys. This is a good organization, and I invite anyone who'd like to be a member to come out and have lunch with us every Wednesday at 12 o'clock at, oh my goodness, St. Paul's United Methodist Church. So congratulations for our 90th. We've worked hard for this. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I don't have many comments other than to say thank yous to the staff for the report that was given this evening by Commander Smiley regarding our ordinance on recreational burning. But also, I think that there's been some great activities that have moved forward. The RCA did their open house as they moved into the downtown on Washington Street. This past weekend, there was, if you couldn't, nobody could say they didn't have anything to do. There was many activities through St. Mary's Park. I know that we had our last Food Truck Friday downtown. Thanks to Joel Williamson for spearheading that. And just a lot that's going on in the downtown. And while September's come in and things start to wane, there's still opportunities for activities, and look forward to seeing everybody. Clerk Treasurer LaVoy.
I have no comment this evening, Your Honor.
City Manager Robinson, comments.
Other than congratulating the Kiwanis on their 90th year, I have no other comments.
Thanks. I'll get to do that again on the 18th of September. So, but congratulations. Next is citizens' comments. If there's comments from those present here this evening, mindful of the rules of the chamber, please step forward, state your name, jurisdiction or residence, and 3 minutes. Any comments from those present here this evening? Yes, sir. Please step forward.
I have a quick question.
Sure, step forward.
District 4. Sorry, my voice is gonna go out. I have an implant. I
Name?
was just wondering why there was no fee or fine for no cleaning up after your animal in public situations, like a park, a sidewalk.
For like those walking their dogs and stuff like that. Just your name first, please.
James.
Thanks, James. So I believe there is there's an ordinance. We have a requirement that if people are walking their animals, that they clean up after them. You know, there's bags available at our parks if people don't seem to have one when they should be carrying them themselves. But it is I believe, a civil infraction ordinance that can be cited. So at times we do get calls from people and say, hey, this person comes by my yard every day and they seem to like my yard the better than anybody else's for some reason, probably because the previous dog that was there, I don't know. And then they don't pick it up. And I think there's a call that can be made to that. Obviously, they're not going to sit out there and wait till next time they walk their dog, but sometimes just collecting information, it's police have the opportunities to make that courtesy call to say, hey, listen, if this continues, you're going to be cited, or they might cite them because it's been continuous and the obligation for them to pick up, whether it be on private property or on public property. So we always welcome the comments from the residents if this occurs. And there's an app, you can anybody can go online and it's anonymous and say, hey, there's this continuous problem at fill in the blank, the park or location. And then it becomes then awareness for us to be aware of it as well.
Okay, because animal control just told me
Yeah.
they don't do anything. And
Yeah, they don't. You're correct, because animal control is Monroe County. So that's one of the items that they do not do. In fact, animal control primarily responds to calls for issues that are probably criminal in nature, or they pick up lost animals and take them out to the shelter, which is now managed by the Humane Society of Monroe County. So, but they have a partnership, they do it collectively. So you're right, a call to them, they'd say that's not what they're going to respond to, but we have our ordinance that we would enforce.
okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, James. Other comments from those present here this evening? Yes, sir. Name and jurisdiction, please.
Elliot James, 633 Stone Street. I want to find out when we're going to have a presentation for the Martin Luther King Bridge. And also, I'm still working on the bike trail walking path for the east side of Monroe.
Both good topics, and I know that the manager and I've had conversations, I think some of the council members had, first off with the Martin Luther King Bridge, now that it is functioning and all operational. We don't have a date yet, I can tell you that. We've had some recommendations. Councilman Hayter had a recommendation of a possible invite. So we're kind of working at that internally. That I don't want to speak for the city manager, but I'll tell you that it is being looked into. We're not going to be doing it in the winter either. How about that? I don't think that would be wise. Your second item, I know that Mr. Cochran, with some of the developments on the trail and the grant that was received, I don't know if maybe want to make a comment to that you're asking right now, and rather than you just get the answer, something maybe we can give to everybody that's here and those that are watching. You can maybe respond to that on the trails.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't want to take all your time. I want you to have all your time. Any other comments?
No, that's it.
That's it. Thank you, Mr. James. Manager Robinson, I don't know if you wanted to respond to the trails. I know that Mr. Cochran was
I think
working on
Mr.
a
Cochran,
project.
actually, we just discussed it a few minutes ago, so he would like to be able to let you know the status.
Thank you.
Sir, Honorable Mayor, City Council, Mark Cochran, Director of Economic and Community Development. Recently, City Council accepted a grant from SimCog for a regional planning grant related to the Orchard East Greenway Trail, which is a component of both the Orchard East Neighborhood Master Plan as well as the Heritage Corridor Master Plan. And part of that, we will be looking at how that trail connects into a wider network and how that spans both into our neighboring jurisdictions in Frenchtown and Monroe Township, linking with other pieces of the trail. So with that, we'll be looking at how it connects into the recent trail project that Monroe Township and the city worked on the Pleasance Road going out to Bulls Harbor, and at the north side where that trail connects into other trail network that both extends through the eastern area of the city as well as north into Frenchtown Township and the wider Heritage Trail as well. So all those connecting points will be evaluated as part of the upcoming planning and design.
Understand correctly, there's opportunities for other trails within the Orchard East and the community that may, as we always try to find and seek grant funding that are at least being considered at this time.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions for Mark? And Mr. James, if you want to speak with Mark afterwards, I am sure he might fill you in some other items that you've asked about as well on the trees. Yeah, you bet. Other comments from those present here this evening? Any other public comments? Seeing none.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Germaine to adjourn. Clerk, please call the roll.
Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Hayter?
Yes.
Stilgrave?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes.
And thank you all for being here and questions.